All right, so we're diving into this case, the death of Micah Miller.
Yeah.
Micah Miller, just 30 years old, married to a pastor, John Paul Miller,
Right.
and found dead in Lumber River State Park, which is here in North Carolina.
Mhm.
And officially, it's been ruled as, but her family very much suspects foul play.
Yes.
And you've given us a ton of stuff to go through on this
A
one.
lot of material.
We've got news articles and court documents and even social media posts.
It's going to be interesting.
Let's see what we can uncover.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this case is really fascinating because it really hinges on this contrast between the official ruling and the family's very deep suspicions that there's something more to this.
Right.
So to really get to the bottom of this, I think we need to start by tracing Micah's steps in those final hours leading up to her death.
Okay, so, well, we have this 911 call,
Yes.
and she calls 911, and she says to the dispatcher, she's about to do something, and she asks for her location to be tracked so that her family can find her. And it's really eerie how calm she sounds.
Yeah, it's a very, very unsettling detail, her demeanor on that call, and it's also crucial evidence, right? And so if we take that and we combine it with what we know about the timeline of her last day, piece together from surveillance footage from stores and even Micah's own Ring camera at her house.
Right.
We see her purchasing a shop, then stopping for gas, and then making that final 911 call from the park.
Right. And her phone records actually show a Google search
Yes.
for national parks near me
Oh,
just before she ends up at Number River.
okay.
So was she just looking for a secluded place to end her life?
Right.
Or was there something more going on?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question here.
Yeah.
And this is where the troubled nature of her marriage, I think, becomes a very important piece of the puzzle.
Right.
Because Micah had actually filed for divorce just a few weeks before her death, accusing John Paul of infidelity and emotional abuse, and even making threats against her.
Right. And Micah's sister backs up these claims in a sworn affidavit.
Oh, wow.
Stating that John Paul was controlling Micah's medical care and manipulating her finances and isolating her from loved ones.
So this sounds like a textbook case of what we call coercive control,
Oh,
which is a pattern of behavior designed to dominate and control a partner, and it often escalates over time.
wow.
And this is where a very chilling statement that Micah made to her sister comes into play.
Okay.
Micah actually told her sister, "If I end up with a bullet in my head, it was not by me, it was JP."
Wow, that is a very powerful statement.
Yeah,
And one that you can't really ignore, I don't think.
absolutely not.
And it casts a very dark shadow over this whole situation.
Yeah.
Especially when you consider John Paul's actions following Micah's death.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
His sermon announcing her death was very strange, like detached almost.
Really?
He insisted that everyone leave very quietly and emphasized Micah's mental health struggles, which her family completely denies, by the way.
So it's almost as if he was trying to control the narrative around her death.
Shape the public's perception of her death in a way that benefited him.
Right.
And then there's this very unsettling detail about John Paul labeling Micah's attempts to seek support from church members as demonic.
Wow. Yeah, that's a big red flag.
Huge red flag.
That level of control, that manipulation raises so many questions.
Yeah.
And then there was this incident where he posted a nude photo of Micah online after she filed for divorce.
Oh my gosh.
And that's what's known as revenge,
right.
which is just a blatant act of retaliation and humiliation, again, designed to silence and control her.
It's really awful.
Yeah.
It demonstrates a pattern of abuse and control that goes beyond just verbal or emotional manipulation.
Right. And so now Micah's father's claims become particularly important.
Okay.
He points to bruises on her body, multiple shell casings at the scene, a bullet actually lodged in a tree.
Wow.
All things that don't really line up with the simple self-inflicted gunshot.
Yeah, so are these inconsistencies signs of a struggle?
Right.
Or could someone have forced Micah to take her own life?
Which is possible.
It's a very real possibility.
Yeah.
But it's an incredibly difficult thing to prove legally.
Right.
Proving coercion in a suicide case requires a meticulous examination of the victim's mental state.
Right.
And really looking into the abuser's actions leading up to the death.
So we're in this very unsettling situation where
Yeah.
we have evidence pointing toward a troubled relationship.
Right.
Maybe even a abuse. But officially, it's still a suicide.
It's a very difficult situation.
So what happens next?
Well, thankfully, the FBI has actually been consulted on this case.
Okay.
which I think is a significant development.
Right.
Because it means that the investigation might expand beyond the initial findings.
Okay.
They'll be looking for any evidence that either supports or refutes the theory of coercion.
Right, but Micah's family lawyer has expressed concerns that the investigation might already be biased toward the suit conclusion.
I see.
They fear that key evidence might be overlooked or even dismissed.
It just seems like this case gets more complex the deeper we go.
Absolutely.
And that's what makes it so important that we're doing this deep dive.
Right.
We need to examine all the evidence, every angle,
Yep.
and try to understand what really happened to Micah Miller.
Okay, so we've got the timeline.
Yes.
And we've got this marriage, which was very troubled.
A lot of red flags.
Yeah, but there's this whole other layer that we need to explore, and that is John Paul Miller's own past, his time as a pastor.
Oh, okay.
This is where it gets even more complicated.
Interesting. Ready?
All right.
Let's do it. Okay, so picking up where we left off, let's kind of dig into this John Paul Miller guy.
Okay.
And his history.
Okay.
Especially his time as a pastor at Solid Rock Church.
Right.
What's really interesting here is this contrast between his public persona and the allegations that have kind of come out against him.
Yeah, some pretty disturbing stuff.
Like what?
Like, we uncovered a 1999 assault and battery conviction.
Oh, wow.
Where he apparently hit a woman with his truck.
Oh, my gosh.
Not once, but twice.
Wow.
And then dragged her down the road.
That's awful.
Yeah, this isn't just some useful indiscretion. This is serious.
Yeah.
It raises a lot of red flags about this guy.
It really does.
And then it gets even more unsettling.
Okay.
When you factor in the affidavit from his ex-wife, who alleges that he admitted to having sex with underage church members.
What?
That he was addicted to sex workers.
Oh, my God.
And that he even had an affair with Micah while she was still a teenager, babysitting his children.
Wow. So we're not just talking about infidelity here.
Right.
This is suggesting a pattern of predatory behavior and abuse of power.
Especially with his position in the church.
Exactly. It makes you think, how many other potential victims might be out there?
Right, yeah.
People who were maybe silenced by fear or shame.
So we've got this violent incident from his past. And now we've got these very disturbing allegations from his ex-wife.
Right.
Is there anything else?
Well, remember that Facebook post we discussed earlier from one of John Paul's other exes?
Right.
She claims they dated when she was just 14 and he was 19.
Okay.
And he was already seeing his first wife at the time.
So we're seeing some potential grooming behavior.
Right.
Yeah.
That age difference alone is concerning.
Right, yeah.
And then the fact that he was involved with multiple women simultaneously, it just shows this pattern of deception.
Right.
A disregard for boundaries.
Yeah, so this is starting to paint a very disturbing picture of John Paul.
It really is.
It's like there's this really dark undercurrent to his personality.
Absolutely. And it's not just limited to romantic relationships.
Okay.
One of Micah's friends actually attended Solid Rock Church.
Okay.
And spoke about experiencing these relentless attacks from John Paul after she and her husband left the congregation.
So this need for control extended beyond his personal relationship.
It seems so.
Yeah.
He seemed to use his position to manipulate and intimidate people who questioned him.
Wow. So think back to Micah trying to leave the marriage.
Right.
Maybe he saw that as the ultimate betrayal.
Yeah, a challenge to his carefully constructed image.
Which might explain his actions after her death.
Like posting the nude photo online.
Exactly. It was an attempt to regain control.
Yeah.
To punish her, even in death.
For daring to leave him.
And those videos Micah posted on Facebook.
Right, the ones where she talks about the abuse.
Yeah, and she asks, God hates divorce, but how does God feel about abuse?
Oh, wow. That's powerful.
It's heartbreaking. Like, she was trying to find her voice.
Right.
To speak out about her experience, maybe in a veiled way.
It's really tragic to think that she felt trapped and alone.
Right.
Even while surrounded by a community that should have offered support.
And this brings up the fact that abuse can happen even in seemingly loving environments.
Absolutely.
Victims are so afraid to speak up.
Right, for fear of being judged or disbelieved.
So Micah's case shows how important it is to believe survivors.
Yeah.
And to offer support without judgment. And to challenge those systems that allow abusers to continue doing what they do.
Absolutely.
So we've got this pattern of behavior with John Paul.
Yeah, lots of red flags.
But what about the investigation into Micah's death?
Right.
Her family believes it was skewed.
I see. So what are their specific concerns with the investigation?
Well, her lawyer has pointed out some really glaring omissions in the report.
Okay.
For example, it doesn't identify any witnesses who cooperated with the investigation.
Right.
And it doesn't even establish John Paul's whereabouts at the time of Micah's death.
So they didn't even bother to determine the husband's alibi,
Apparently not.
especially given the history of abuse and all these suspicious circumstances.
Yeah, I know, right?
That's a major red flag. It makes you question the whole investigation.
And it gets worse.
Oh, no.
They failed to collect crucial forensic evidence.
What do you mean?
Her lawyer claims that no autopsy, no toxicology analysis, no gunshot residue tests were performed on her body.
Oh, wow. Are you serious?
These are standard procedures in a death investigation,
I would think so.
especially one like this.
With so many unanswered questions.
Right.
It's almost as if the investigation was intentionally incomplete.
Right.
Like they didn't want to uncover anything that might contradict the suicide ruling.
And that's why it's good that the FBI is now involved.
Right. Hopefully they'll be more thorough.
So where does all of this leave us?
Right. Where are we now?
We have this evidence that points towards a potential cover-up
Yeah.
and this really troubling history of abuse.
Lots of bad stuff.
But we still don't have an answer.
Right. We still don't know what happened to Micah.
So I guess that's what we need to explore
Yeah, we have a lot of lingering questions.
in part 3 of this deep dive.
Let's do it.
It's really unbelievable how much we've uncovered.
Yeah.
It's about this timeline that doesn't really make sense.
Right.
And this marriage, which is just full of warning signs.
Yeah, so many red flags.
And then John Paul, this pastor with this dark past.
Right.
And it's crazy that it's all tied to this one woman's death.
Yeah, and that's what's so important to remember here, right? We have Micah's own words
Right.
expressing fear for her life.
Right.
And we have these witness accounts that paint this really clear picture of a controlling and abusive husband.
Right.
And we have this forensic evidence that just raises so many questions about how she actually died.
Yeah.
But the official ruling is still suicide.
It's like we're looking at two different stories.
Right.
You got the official narrative,
Yeah.
and then you've got this overwhelming sense that something just isn't right.
Yeah.
Like justice hasn't been served.
And that's really what makes this case so difficult.
Yeah.
Because even if the FBI uncovers some evidence that points to foul play,
Right.
proving that John Paul is legally responsible for Micah's death is going to be a real challenge.
Because you're basically trying to prove a crime that was committed through manipulation.
Exactly.
Through years of abuse.
Yeah, years of systematic abuse and control.
So it's not like a straightforward murder investigation.
No, not at all. Legally speaking, there's rarely a smoking gun in cases like this.
Right.
No direct evidence that links the abuser to what happened.
So how do you even start to build a case like that?
Well, it's really about putting together the pieces of a very complex puzzle.
Right.
So the FBI will be looking at patterns of behavior,
Okay.
witness testimonies, financial records, any kind of digital communication like emails or text messages,
Right.
anything that might show a clear connection between John Paul's actions and Micah's state of mind.
It's a lot to go through.
It's a massive undertaking.
And even if they do find that link,
Yeah.
how do you convince a jury that he was actually responsible for her death?
It's a really high bar to clear,
Right.
legally speaking.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to remember that justice isn't always about pressing charges or getting a conviction.
Right.
Sometimes it's about uncovering the truth,
Mm-hmm.
giving the family some closure,
Yeah.
and maybe preventing something like this from happening again.
So Micah's case really reminds us that abuse doesn't always leave visible scars.
That's so true.
They can be psychological,
Yeah.
emotional, financial.
Fundamentally, it can really chip away at a person's sense of self-worth
Right.
and even their will to live.
So we have to be more aware of the signs
Yeah.
and listen without judgment.
And offer support
Right.
to anyone who might be trapped in a dangerous situation.
And we have to hold institutions accountable and create a space where victims feel safe coming forward.
Absolutely.
Micah's words in that Facebook video really stick with me.
The one about God and abuse.
Yeah, it makes you think about your own beliefs.
Right, and it challenges us to really prioritize the safety of victims.
So what can we do to prevent another tragedy like this one?
I think that's a question we all need to think about.
Yeah.
It requires a commitment to breaking the silence around domestic violence
Right.
and creating a world where everyone feels safe and respected.
So Micah's story may have ended in tragedy, but her voice can still be a catalyst for change.
That's a good way to put it.
It's up to all of us to take action.
Right, we can all make a difference.
This has been a really tough deep dive.
Yeah, emotionally draining.
But it's also been eye-opening.
Absolutely.
So I hope it encourages everyone to be more aware and more compassionate.
And more willing to speak up.
Exactly.
If you see something, say something.
And if you're experiencing abuse, please reach out for help.
Yeah. You don't have to go through this alone.
There are people who care, and there's a path to safety and healing.
And there are resources available.
Right.
So don't give up hope.
Well, thanks for joining us on this journey.
It's been a pleasure.
We'll continue to follow this case and keep you all updated.
Sounds good.
Until then, stay curious and stay engaged.
Stay safe, everyone.